Let's look at some of the other practical elements that impel the Europeans toward the colonization of Africa. Remember that during the slave trade, the principal way that slaves were gotten was through trade relations, that there were numbers, there were many all along the coastal areas of Africa, African merchants who played key roles in enabling that slave trade. But then the slave trade is abolished. Those African merchants have built their lives on this trade, and now these merchants have to fight with each other to find commodities that they can continue to sell to the Europeans. The traders discovered a variety of agricultural goods that the Europeans desired. And these goods included things like palm oil, kernels, groundnuts. We call the groundnuts peanuts. And so the merchants organized the production of these goods, and they fought with each other over control of these goods. And as with any economic situation, they produced more and more goods, and as the supply for these goods went up, the prices went down. Now, for the European merchants who are buying from the African merchants, the fall in prices is a serious problem. And so from the standpoint of eliminating the African middleman, the Europeans figured that they could, even with the fall of prices, still profit from the production and sale of these agricultural goods. In other words, by eliminating the middleman and the take that the middleman has in this trade, then the Europeans can benefit, and the Europeans can continue to profit. The second practical factor impelling European colonization, I should again back up, I apologize, summarize the last thing I said. So, in other words, the mechanism for eliminating the African middleman is to actually seize control of a given territory, and then with that control in hand, be able to eliminate the African middleman. The second factor that I want to address here is the opening of the Suez Canal, 1869. I don't know if you can visualize the map of Africa. I should have a map here, but I neglected to produce one. If you can visualize the map of Africa, you can visualize the Mediterranean going across the northern coast of Africa and then reaching to the the western coast of Asia, Egypt in the northwesternmost part of Africa. There's a narrow channel that divides Egypt from Asia, and that narrow channel is called the Red Sea. And there's a small block of land that connects in the northwesternmost portion of Africa and I guess you'd have to say the southeasternmost portion of Asia. There is a block of land that holds the two continents together. It doesn't really hold them together. They're connected at that point. The two continents are connected at that point. Now, in 1869, a canal cutting across that block of land connected the Mediterranean with the Red Sea, and from the Red Sea on into the Indian Ocean. When the Suez Canal opened, and I don't know for a fact that the British understood this in 1868, but in 1869, they understood that that Suez Canal was of crucial concern to the British. And why? It was of crucial concern to the British because it shortened the transportation time, the sea time, the time that it took to get from Britain to the major colony that the British had on the planet, the colony of India. Before that time, the British had to sail right round the southern tip of Africa and then back up the Indian Ocean to India. Now they could sail through the Mediterranean, cut through the Suez Canal, down the Red Sea, and direct to India. At a certain point, the Suez Canal comes to be known as the windpipe of the British Empire, so crucial to British access to its largest and most important colony in India. And so control over that canal, that is some kind of seizure of territory so that the British can assure themselves continued control over the canal, that becomes a crucial element of British policy. Again, the quest to take control over specific chunks of territory. And the third practical factor that I wanted to mention in terms of impelling the Europeans to colonization is that by the late 1860s, it became apparent that the southern portion of Africa had tremendous, invaluable mineral resources. We're talking about gold. We're talking about diamonds. We're talking about copper. Key elements, key minerals for industrial production and wealth. Now, all these factors impelling colonization would not hold the weight that they held at the end of the 19th century if the European quest to control Africa was not matched by the military means that the Europeans had. And there were a number of military factors or ecological factors, maybe we could say, that previously had prevented European control over African peoples. Now, we talked about one of those factors some sessions back when we talked about the difficulty that the Europeans had in directly raiding to capture slaves. The difficulty was, one of the difficulties, well, the two difficulties were these. In the first place, the African disease environment was a deadly environment for the Europeans. When they set foot on African soil, they were assaulted by tropical African soil. They were assaulted by African mosquitoes and caught African diseases to which their bodies had no immunity, no built-in immunity. And the second factor was that the Africans were skilled warriors. The Europeans had superior weapons, but they weren't so superior that the African knowledge of African turf could not overcome the Europeans. But by the late 19th century, both these factors had, to a greater or lesser degree, been wiped off the table by European advances. In the first place, the Europeans discovered quinine, and quinine was effective. Daily doses of quinine If you ever go to the grocery store, pick up some tonic water. And the active ingredient in tonic water, very bitter, is something called quinine, made from some plant. And quinine offers resistance to one of the worst of the African mosquito-borne diseases, malaria. And so by taking daily doses of quinine, the Europeans could successfully stay on the African continent without dying of disease. And the second factor is the development of the first machine guns. One of the first machine gun, because with the machine gun, it didn't matter how well the other side knew the turf, you could mow them down. One British writer, observing the situation in Africa in the late 19th century, critical of that situation, believing in the value of British civilization, commented, "Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not." I don't think I said that with the right meter. Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not. The Maxim gun, one of the first of these machine guns. In addition, the Europeans also, by the 1870s, had invented the breech-loading repeating rifle. And this Maxim gun, which was capable of firing 70 bullets per minute, was invented in 1889. Together with modern artillery, again, this is another advantage that the Europeans have. Together with modern artillery, these advances in weapons technologies proved to be more powerful than anything that the Africans could overcome. As an example of the devastating power of these weapons, when the British fought the Sudanese in 1898, they lost 49 men as compared to nearly 11,000 Sudanese. So it was just basically a killing field for the British. In our next, we will look at the actual beginning of the scramble for Africa, the actual steps that lead to almost the complete colonization of the African continent. Sumaya, Obagora. There, Obagore.